Hi, Todd VanDenburg here with VanDenburg Capital Management and another Uncommon Sense update. So today and this past couple weeks, the news has been filled with reports of, concerns over what's going on in Europe with, the Ukraine and Russia and what's going to happen there. Is there going to be an invasion by Russia into the Ukraine? What impact is that going to have on the economy of Europe and potentially the United States? And all things that are worthy of consideration. But in the grand scheme of things, even if some sort of a conflict, skirmish, mini war, whatever you want to call it, does break out there, it's not likely to spread to all of Europe, and it certainly isn't going to have a significant financial impact or economic impact on the United States. So, while as a human, we never like to see war or anything like that. As a pure financial matter, it's not something that's really high on our radar right now. But something that I do want to talk about today is a milestone that sort of got glossed over in the media here this last week, and that is that the U.S. debt just creased, wait for it, $30 trillion. It's stunning. It's a stunning number. One of my first sort of memories when I was just in the military in the early 80s, I remember being at Fort Huachuca, Arizona, and learning that the national debt of the United States had just creased $1 trillion. And I can remember back then, as just a young kid, thinking, $1 trillion of debt, why could we ever need to borrow more than that? Well, here we are, 40 plus years later, and we owe now $30 trillion. So as people start to look at this, genuinely, people start to get concerned. I mean, $30 trillion is an amazing amount of money to owe. And if we can't ever pay it or can't pay it back, that could have a significant, effect on the U.S. economy and just our society in general. So I want to go through just a few charts here to explain why, even at $30 trillion, we're not overly concerned with the national debt. We are concerned. We don't like 30 trillion, but I'm not overly concerned. And here's why. So the first thing is we have to understand that when you owe somebody money, really, as long as you make your monthly payment, the person that lent you the money, which is what our debt is, it's people that lent us money, they don't really have much to say. So let's take a quick look at a chart that shows what the interest on our national debt is sort of doing. And as you can see, the interest on our national debt is, 350 to $400 billion. And, that's a real number. But now I want to contrast that with another chart, and that's federal tax receipts. And you can see that federal tax receipts are actually growing at a faster rate than the interest payments on our debt. So anytime we ever get to the point where, you hear news reports of, the government's going to default on its debt, that's really just a bunch of hyperbole, because we have plenty of federal tax revenues to more than pay for, the interest on our debt. Federal tax revenues right now, if memory serves, are running at around $4 trillion a year. So, I mean, if your interest on your debt is 400 billion and your income is, 4 trillion, you've got a debt to income ratio that's not horrible. Our problem from a debt standpoint is that we just continue to find new ways to spend another trillion and another trillion. And I am sort of heartened to see recently here in the last few days some media reports of both Democrats and Republicans taking a look at this $30 trillion number and saying, maybe it's time to start getting our fiscal house in order. But again, even if we don't, in the current situation, it's really not the end of the world, because our federal tax revenues continue to grow at a pace that is outstripping the increases in the interest payment on our national debt. Now, some people ask, how is it possible that the interest on our debt is not just ballooning as our national debt has been ballooning? And that is a great question. And to answer it, you have to understand that, the United States has been accumulating debt, again, as I mentioned, $1 trillion in the early 80s, up to $30 trillion now. But big chunks of our national debt was taken on when interest rates were significantly higher than where they are now. So what happens is, as that older debt matures, which it is now, every time we just go back to the market and refinance that debt, and we're refinancing that debt at a third of the cost, or more sometimes, that the original interest rate was at. So imagine we got some debt at 5 or 6%, and now we're refinancing it at 2, right? So we still have the debt, but the payment on that debt just went down by 70%. And so that's why the interest payment on our national debt has not skyrocketed, is because we're still at the point where we're refinancing old debt. Now, probably in the next 5 years, we will get to the point where there will be no more older debt that is at a higher interest rate than current interest rates. And that's when we start to think that we might have to worry, assuming the government doesn't do something. So there's a lot of unknowns between now and 5 years from now. But this isn't something that we're going to just fall off a cliff 5 years from now, as interest rates, or as the interest payment on our debt, starts to climb. And because it's going to take 10 years after that for us to be refinancing debt from 20 years ago at higher interest rates. So again, our national debt's a real problem, no doubt. But we have a super strong economy, and the interest on our debt, compared to how strong our economy is not really something that's off the charts. One more chart, at the risk of using the word chart too many times. One more chart that sort of illustrates that is the interest on our debt as a percentage of GDP. So the GDP is like, how much economic activity generally is going on in our economy. And when you look at the interest as a percentage of GDP, right now it's really not anywhere near its highs of the 80s and the 90s and the 2000s. It's more like where it was in the 60s and the 70s. And we weren't predicting the end of our culture, economy, society back then. And so for people to be talking about our national debt out of context, I think sort of misses the point. So again, our national debt, it's a real number, $30 trillion. Oh my gosh, that's so much money. I don't even know how big of a pile that would be. Who knows? It might stretch from here to the moon. I'm not sure. But as long as we're making our payments, which we can, our GDP continues to grow, federal tax revenues continue to grow, personal spending continues to grow, the amount of money we have in the economy has continued to grow. So there's plenty of money to buy things. There's plenty of activity in our country that's causing taxable events, that is allowing the federal government to collect more and more tax revenue. So while that $30 trillion number is something that is not great, it's not something that we should be overly concerned about at this time. So a lot of information there. If anybody has any questions about this or any other financial matter, it's a pretty uncertain time right now. Please respond to this video. Give me a call. Shoot me an email. I'm happy to respond to any question that anybody's willing to ask. It's what I'm here for. So that was your update. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, give us a like, give us a share, and I'll be back again soon with another Uncommon Sense update. Thanks for watching.
If you'd like to be the first to hear of more Uncommon Sense updates like these, please click the subscribe button below. We'd really appreciate it. Thanks again.